evening edition of The Outer Realm with myself, Michelle Desrochers. Can you tell I'm completely lost without my little bubbly compadre, Amelia? I am. She's not with us again this evening. As mentioned last night, if you missed last night's show, Amelia just lost her father. So she's going to be a little bit on hiatus, and hopefully she'll be back really soon because we really miss her. And I really miss her like stink. So it's been really difficult. But we do want to give her the time to just get through this and give her family the time to get through this. So you guys have me. Anyway, we are broadcasting live here on UFO Paranormal Radio 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. So tonight we are on YouTube, but again, you have to stop by the UFO Paranormal Radio account. That's where we are. And of course, please join us in chat. We'll definitely be in there, and I will do my best to keep up with you guys. And don't forget to subscribe. There's a lot of stuff coming up to this station also, so you guys will have all kinds of treats. So don't forget to head over to the Outer Realm, follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. Amelia is really good with keeping everything up. It's going to be a little bit quiet because it's hard. She's much more thorough than I am on the ball. I'm just got my nose in so many other different things, so I do apologize, but I will do my best. Anyway, we do want to give a big shout out to the amazing folks over at Folgers Coffee who do partially sponsor tonight's segment. And what a segment it will be. I don't know about you guys, but I've been looking forward to tonight's guest, Morgan Daimler. She's just wonderful. She's written all kinds of books on fairies. And people think, oh, fairies, we don't want to, what do we want to learn about these cute little things? Because they weren't so cute all the time. There's a lot of folklore about fairies. And we're going to get into a whole lot of that tonight, I hope. They were really aggressive, but they were also known to be very magical beings. And some really old bloodlines are said to have stemmed from the fairy race. And the more I started researching some of this in preparation for tonight's show, the more mind blown I was getting. I was just like, what? This is a thing? I was starting to feel like I was watching a segment of Lord of the Rings. I really was. And who knew? This really is a thing. And I'm pretty versed on stuff, and you hear about it and you basically get into a lot of it and it's out there, but the way Morgan delves into all of this stuff, it's just like, wow. In fact, there's just so much information that we made a point of booking her for a second date in the first part of the year because it's just amazing stuff. And I think you guys are really going to love it. So I'm actually going to go back in because I'm going to read you her bio because this woman is just fabulous. Now, this is something that, again, I usually have Amelia do, but being that I'm solo, you guys are going to have to try to bear with me. I am going right now to share up some links. So again, bear with me for people who are looking for the links. I am going to be sending those out right now as we speak on Facebook. I'm going to get onto the Outer Realm page right now, and then you have my full undivided attention. So please bear with me. Okay. And here we go. Publish there. And we're going to come in and publish on my personal page.
Hello?
Also. Oh, you're here. I'm still trying to get the live link up. How are you, Morgan?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Okay, one second. There we go. Okay, I do apologize. I usually have Amelia to do all this for me, and it's just not a thing right now. So she is not here. Are you on camera with me?
I'm trying to get the camera to start.
Is it just me, or is this like Skype done this total other thing? Because I'm really struggling just trying to get everybody on. So I was in the process of doing when I'm sitting here trying to get these live links up is I wanted to read your bio for everybody. So everybody, Morgan Daimler is the author of more than 24 books on subjects relating to Irish mythology, paganism, which perfect, and fairies. She has contributed to multiple anthologies and magazines, as well as taught workshops on these topics across the United States and internationally. I have just been like really excited for this show because it's so out there. People just don't, when you think fairies, they just don't go back far enough. And
That's true.
right? Paganism. I don't know if it's just, do you think it's just because of the religious mindset of people that they forget that there was something prior to Christianity that had a whole other world to explore?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that when people think of mythology, they kind of equate it to fiction
Yes.
and not so much to things that people actually believed.
Yes. Yes. Because paganism, like that's the roots, pretty much, right there. So, okay, when people think, again, when people think cute little fairies, I know that, in my research, not so cute, and but very noble also. In some of the texts that I have read, they were very noble race. They're magical race,
Mm.
but cute isn't always the way to define them. So maybe, I have to say, I'll just take a moment. When I was in Scotland, I know this is huge, not just in Ireland, but Scotland, the UK on average, Iceland, places like that, because I remember visiting all the fairy circles, the fairy springs, and the grotto of the fairy king. I was like, what? And it goes, I shouldn't go up in there. I have to. Really have to. So can you start us off that way? Maybe how did you get into this whole why fairies?
It's always been an interest for me, from when I was very small. And, I am part of the Irish American diaspora. So my grandfather was from Ireland, and we grew up with certain beliefs connected to that. And it's not things that are ever really taught to you. It's just, if food drops on the floor, that belongs to the fairies, because that
Oh,
was them saying they wanted it. And, you just grow up with that. And
I like that.
um,
I could have got away with eating a lot less stuff I didn't like.
yeah, the fairies have claimed it.
I'll give it to
Um,
the fairies.
yeah. And as I got a little older, when I was in my early teens, I started reading the folklore and getting into the mythology, and I just found it really fascinating.
Hmm.
There's so much to it, and as you had kind of said, talking about the little cutesy fairies,
Yes,
that's sort of that pop culture, view of them. But
right.
when you dig into that older folklore and the mythology and the real, to remove that modern pop culture veneer, there's so much to it, and it's so fascinating. So it just kind
Right.
of sucks me in.
Wow. Wow. So what was it that really drew you in? It's like you say, when you think mythology, people automatically go, oh. But I believe myths start with, like oral folklore, like just stories that just get passed down. And they take it really serious in the UK. They really do. I couldn't believe the amount of places that I went to that were dedicated to the fairy folk.
Yep, yep. And I think for me, part of it was understanding that it's a living belief system.
Mm.
It's not something that's just historic that people hundreds of years ago believed. There's still a lot of modern belief.
Mhm.
There's accounts in Ireland and Iceland both of roads that have been rerouted
I've
because
read that.
yeah, because of something, a tree in Ireland and then a stone in Iceland that belonged to the fairies.
Right.
And the belief, it's still so profound and so real.
Hmm.
Um, there was something that was published online a few years ago. It's called the Fairy Census,
Yes.
but it was actually a study that two different folklorists did, where they interviewed people and asked people to submit their own anecdotal accounts. And these are things from the 1980s through, the early 2000s. And as
These are
people
things from
talking
the
about,
1980s.
Sorry, that's me just trying to look at chat.
that's okay.
Bit me in the butt. Sorry.
I'm hearing voices.
You are.
It's my own voice.
I like this show because we could just put everything off to the fairies. This is great.
It'll be an interesting night.
No doubt. Okay, continue, please.
Well, it's just that idea that these are things, these are beliefs that people still have, and these are beings that people still encounter, and people still, relate stories of, and it just has such a vibrancy to it, but it also has so much history to it, and to me, like that's an intriguing combination.
Do gnomes fall into the fairy family? Because I remember reading an article where they were having a problem bringing a highway into Iceland, and because gnomes are actually sabotaging their efforts. So is that a thing?
Yeah, there's some debate among scholars about how far back gnomes go. Kind of the first time that we see them being referenced, I think, is like the 16th century. But it's definitely a thing today. There's a lot of belief and stories about it. In Iceland, they have the Huldafolk, the hidden folk, elves, trolls, all sorts of fascinating stuff. I was lucky enough to be able to go to Iceland in 2018, and it's a very intense place to be. I can see why they have the beliefs there that they do.
No, yeah, I can well imagine. A lot of people think that these beings like elves do fall into the fairies, like the fairy realm a little bit. I remember again reading an article in my research a couple weeks ago, and they were a pretty noble line. They would breed only within their bloodlines, like most, I guess, royal lines. If they stepped outside of that, apparently it would diminish their magical abilities. Like it was very important to stay pure. Is that something that you've come across in your work and your studies?
There's so many different beliefs when you start digging into it. Certainly, the idea that elves are another word for fairy is something we find. Of course, there are people today who argue that no, they're very distinctly separate. But sort of across history, you would see the words being used synonymously.
Yes.
In Scotland, it's actually more common in some places to refer to them as elves. In English, and you'd say the exact same thing was a fairy somewhere else. And the idea that they can be sort of reclusive and keep to themselves, not be fans of humanity, is certainly out there. I mean, there are also other stories you'll find where they take sort of the opposite view. Kidnapping or taking humans to increase their numbers.
Wow,
trying to say this as nicely as I can.
No, that's okay. Feel free. That is interesting. Are there reports of people going missing? Like, does this stem into that whole, what is it? What was I reading? The missing 411. Yes. Does this, because this is pretty worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah. There are some people who make that connection. I'm one of them, full disclosure, but not everyone does. So,
right. So what is your theory on that then?
Well, if you look across sort of the extent of folklore, and in the Irish, back to the oldest written account we have in Irish, which is dated to about like the 5th through 7th century, it involves a being of the fairies, a woman of the fairies, basically coming and taking a person, a human. And we have quite a lot of folklore that relates to things like that. There's a whole folklore trope called the stolen bride, where the fairies would come in and take a bride as she was, on her wedding night, so that she could marry one of them instead of the person she was supposed to marry.
Oh, wow.
And then, go be among the fairies. So when we look at that modern, the missing 411 stuff, it's so similar in the way it's described.
Mm-hmm.
People who disappear sort of in familiar places or places that they shouldn't have had an issue with, um, places
Mm-hmm.
they knew or places they were, competent to be in. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the others, particularly the ones with children, the missing 411 with children, where they disappear and then are found like a great distance away, but unharmed, and it's sort of inexplicable. That also kind of lines up with some of
Mm-hmm.
the folklore that we have. So,
Oh, that's fascinating because I delved into that, I think probably about a year ago, but everything that I was coming across was very, people think, oh, it's extraterrestrial. Then I think to myself, are these beings indeed interdimensional beings also?
there's certainly a strong argument for fairies as a type of interdimensional being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's not uncommon at this point to hear people refer to them that way.
Mm-hmm.
That their world, the world of fairy, is just a different dimension or a connected dimension to ours.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a whole big debate between some people in the fairy lore community and some people in the ufology community about whether aliens are actually fairies or,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
what's going
Yeah.
on with that. So,
Well, the paranormal community is much the same. They'll say that, um, black-eyed children and demonics, and they're all extraterrestrial also. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we're extraterrestrial. I mean, if you're going to keep poking at that bear, I mean, anything, I suppose, is possible because, I mean, there are so many different dimensions, but it's fascinating to me because there were so many beings here prior to humankind. And, you just don't know what who they were, where they came from. Like some people believe we have a Middle Earth also.
yep. Yeah,
You
well,
know,
and a lot of the mythology with fairies is that they were here first,
right.
then humans came in and either drove them out or forced them into sort of hiding,
Hmm.
basically. So,
So did they ever live in unison? Elves, fairies with mankind? Was there ever any kind of trust in your findings or in your folklore?
it depends on the folklore.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
just because it is so varied, but usually the stories that we have now present it a little bit more as a contentious kind of situation that humans showed up on the scene
Hmm.
and were sort of excessively aggressive, I guess we
Oh,
could say.
yeah. Okay, we'll
Uh,
go with that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot of stories where humans and fairies get along or cooperate
Mm-hmm.
or have a more positive interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's interesting to kind of look at you know, the breadth of it. Like you said, you'd been to Scotland.
Yeah.
There's the MacLeod family in
Yes.
Scotland. They have
Yes.
their castle there. They have a fairy flag. And one of the versions of the story, because of course there's several, one of the
Yes.
versions of the story is that the Lord of the MacLeods had a fairy lover, had a
Oh.
fairy woman who was his lover, and there was a child, and so she gave him this fairy flag, and said that if they, held it up over a battlefield, they were insured to win 3 times. It would only work 3 times.
Right.
And it's been used twice, I believe, and they did win both of the battles that it was brought out in.
Wow.
And
Wow.
now it's just stored in the castle.
They should have used it at Culloden.
Yeah.
It might have been a good benefit. But I see, I love stories like that. I think that's amazing because a lot of this stuff comes from oral history. Just, it's all people had at one point. It was just stories that got passed down, and they withstood the test of time. Like they're still going on. And I always find that like really, really fascinating. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely.
the fact that there's so much hardcore belief in it. Like I say, when I'm looking at, the fairy springs and I'm looking at, at the all these fairy circles within the Isle of Skye, like they're all over the place. And I'm sure there's some all over the place, and then you look up and there's this looks like an old tower, an old stone tower. And like, well, that's the Fairy King's grotto. And like, just can't not do it, I sent my
Right.
son. I'm like, come on, you're really nimble and agile. You get up there. And he goes, what? Yeah, I guess go on up there. Tell me what's in it. You can't resist. He goes, if I get cursed, it's your fault. Okay, I'll take it. Whatever. It's just, So I don't know. Like, of course, we didn't see anything, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't anything really observing what we're doing.
Right. Right.
Like, are they hiding? Are they translucent beings? Do they slip in and out of portals? Like, what is it exactly? Like, how do they move about?
Yeah. I mean, I think if we look at the older folklore, there's definitely this idea that they are around us and
Yes.
we just can't perceive them. We can't
Mhm.
see them. That they have this ability to sort of elude our senses, if you
Right.
will. And there are also stories that imply, again, getting into the sort of interdimensional, extra dimensional ties, that they have this ability to use portals,
Yes.
to go into portals and leave this dimension and then move from, one place in this world to another place in this world.
Hmm.
Uh,
Like
before.
stargates, even.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Do you find that media has really taken us away from, let's say, getting a deeper understanding of what they're really all about?
I do. I do. And I think it's a little bit of the eternal struggle, if you will, because if
Yes.
you look at literary fairies across the last 400 years, this has kind of always been the case. We're
Hmm.
just seeing it a lot now because they're kind of popular. Um, when you have literature, you have a TV show or you have a movie, a lot of what they present, even when it's based in folklore, is for plot points. You
Hmm.
know, you need a certain thing to happen a certain way. So, you're not going to stick to the strict folklore because
Hmm.
it is too restrictive with a lot of things.
Hmm.
So you get kind of creative with it, which is great.
Yes. Yes.
I write fiction myself too, and it's
It's a
super
lot
fun.
of fun. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. But it definitely changes, I think, how people who consume that media, how they then kind of understand and envision these beings,
Mm-hmm.
like J.M. Barrie with his Peter Pan and Tinkerbell,
Hmm.
and that Tinkerbell, that little tiny winged.
She had a mean streak, man.
She did. She
She
did.
did.
She had that whole murder for hire Wendy
She
thing.
did.
It's a little vicious.
Small
Um,
but mean. Wow.
yeah. Um, but that sort of has become the template in a lot of ways,
Yes.
particularly for children's media, with how we kind of picture
Hmm.
or describe fairies. And across the actual folklore, there's such a huge range. You,
Hmm.
you do have tiny ones, but you have human looking ones, kind of like Tolkien's elves,
Yes.
and you have ones that look like horses, and it's
Oh,
just it's a.
really?
Oh
So
yeah.
can you get into that spectrum a little bit? Like the pagans, obviously, it all started with paganism. Can you maybe start us off at that point? Like, did they worship them? Did they work with them? What was the connection to the pagans?
I mean, the evidence is gonna vary.
Hmm.
Particularly if we're looking at like the more Celtic areas like Ireland and Scotland and Wales and such,
Hmm.
because they've been Christianized for much longer, the material
Yeah.
we have is a little harder to kind of
Hmm.
parse through. If you look at the Norse material, which would
Yes.
be like, Iceland,
Hmm.
because they were Christianized much later, and we do have written material kind of from that sort of crossover period,
Hmm.
um, we can say that it's a layered answer. There are certainly some beings that were associated with what we would call fairies or
Hmm.
elves,
Hmm.
that were viewed as gods.
Hmm.
That would be considered pagan gods.
Yes.
But then you have these other types of beings who they're not quite gods. They're not worshipped as gods necessarily, but they were certainly seen as powerful and influential. Like they could affect how the harvest would come out, or the weather, things like that. So, for example, in Sweden, we know that there was a holiday or a celebration that occurred in the fall, in the autumn, that was called Alfablot, which is like a ritual or a ritual sacrifice to the elves. And it was something that families would do, kind of an at-home ritual.
Right.
But it does show us that they were part of the religion and the spirituality during the
Yes.
pagan period. They were
Yes.
included. And the idea of giving them offerings and sort of propitiating them for things is definitely something that we find in that material. So
Similar to what the solstices would have been like, right? To basically
Yep.
honor and give thanks and be kind to us in the next harvest. And
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Be
and
kind to us going forward. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like right.
So yeah, they seem to occupy that sort of liminal middle zone, I guess we would say.
And do people still honor those traditions today in some of these areas?
Sure.
Oh, really?
Sure. Yep.
Wow.
There's still there are still people who practice or who have revived pagan beliefs. One thing, but you also find people who are Christian,
Yes.
various kinds of Christian, that continue with these practices and beliefs.
That's
Because of it's because of this idea that there are these spirits that are around you that can kind of influence you, and you might not necessarily see them as a good thing, but they're not exactly a bad thing either, and you kind of want to stay on good terms with them.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's like having a house elf. You want to honor your house elf because they could just cause a lot of damage. So that's really fascinating. So we touched on the different types of fairies. You have human-looking fairies. Now, are these hybrids between human and fairies, or were these full-blown? This is what they look like.
Both.
Like, hello. Here's our grand poobah. Our producer, Joe. Hey, Joe. Morgan, Joe Morgan. So yeah. So were they humanoid by origin, or were they crossbred?
That is a complicated and excellent question. Certainly some. You're welcome. Certainly some of them would have been crossbred, as you say, and we do have accounts in Irish and Scottish and in Icelandic material of children who kind of had ancestry on both sides, if you will. It gets a little complicated because the majority of the material we have on fairies describes them as shapeshifters, that they can change their form, that it's hard to know for certain what they actually look like. They are described in a lot of the material as looking human, or as, potentially passing as human, except there's clearly something not this worldly about them.
Right. But that's interesting that you say shapeshifters, because there's so many pieces of folklore out there that show so many different beings as shapeshifting. I mean, Christianity will tell you a demon can shapeshift and mimic and things, of that nature. And there are extraterrestrials that can do that. And now you're saying you got elves and fairies that can do that. I'm just kind of trying to figure it out, connect the dots.
Yeah.
So
and maybe they're all the same thing. We don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, no, it's fascinating, though. It really is. So then you say there are fairy horses. This one intrigues me.
Yep. I mean, there are literal fairy horses, like horses from the world of fairy that fairies ride on. But there's also fairy beings that appear in the form of a horse that are not, like, they're not just a horse. No offense to horses.
No.
They have sentience and intelligence, and some of them were known, like the puka in Ireland would appear sometimes as a pony or horse, and it was to kind of trick people into riding on it and then take them off on this wild ride and then kind of dump them in a ditch because it thought it was funny.
I
not
would think it's funny too, actually. It's
right.
like,
Not all these people would be sober when this was happening.
Well, in Ireland, that could go either way. They know how to have a good time in Ireland. Okay, so you've already touched on three different types. Are there any others? Like where would one go to find a fairy? I mean, we have them here in North America, apparently. I've had people send me pictures over the years saying these are fairies, and I'm looking at them going, it's a fly. But I am not I guess experienced enough to look at the photographs because I've never seen a fairy. I couldn't tell you if it was a fairy or a dragonfly.
As much as I do believe in all of this, and I have dedicated my life to studying it, I will be the first one to say that I would be on your side on that one. Right. I do think that pareidolia is a thing.
Yes.
And that a lot of times when people have pictures of what they say is a fairy, it's actually just an out of focus leaf or an insect or what have you. I'm sure I'll get a lot of hatred from the fairy community for that, but yeah.
No, but I appreciate your honesty with that. It's not something that's just so black and white. I used to do ghost tours, and there was one tree there that was said to be a fairy tree, and nothing ever happened around this tree except for in all the years I did it. On one night, people walked by and they're like, "Why is the tree lit up?" They thought there were Christmas lights in it. I'm like. I mean, it was winter, and I'm going, okay, so that ousts the whole firefly thing because it's winter, and it was just loaded with lights. And when we got closer to it, everything just extinguished. And we looked through it. There were no Christmas lights, no fireflies. We couldn't find an explanation for that. Like, have you ever heard of such a thing?
I have, yeah.
Oh, really?
And the idea of fairy lights, that is a thing. Some people have said they have seen them, things like that. And, I did just say the whole pareidolia thing, but I'm a big fan of both Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one.
Right.
But also, the whole Arthur Conan Doyle view of it, when you've eliminated all the possible, what's left, however improbable, is your answer. So, investigating the paranormal or investigating fairies or what have you, if you eliminate every other possibility.
And see what you're left with.
Right. And that's where you find your real evidence.
So is there a connection between, let's say, all of this older, mythology, folklore? Is there a connection to the paranormal or the supernatural?
I think so. I think it's all sort of interrelated. I don't think we will necessarily ever maybe understand exactly how everything fits together. And a lot of these subjects are very porous. Like I was talking about the whole are they aliens or are they fairies debate that comes up. You'll see the same thing sometimes with hauntings.
Yes.
Is it a ghost? Is it not a ghost? If it's not a ghost, then what is it? And sometimes it just comes down to one person's ghost is another person's fairy is another person's demon.
Perception.
Yeah, perception.
Basically, perception. So, do you feel that some of these older mythologies and ideas influence our modern understanding, let's say, of the supernatural?
I'd like to hope so. I definitely like the idea that it's a continuous stream of belief,
right?
That sort of changes and evolves over time, but is all sort of the same wider concept. And certainly, if you go, to places that still have these living beliefs, Iceland I'm
Yeah.
just going to keep throwing that out there as an example.
Well, it's huge. Yeah, it's
It
huge
is.
folklore out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an interesting place because if you ask, a lot of people will say that no, of course they don't believe in elves or Huldafolk because,
Hmm.
that's not rational and they're good skeptical people. But on
Yeah.
the same hand, these are the same people who, won't move that rock
Yeah.
because it's a fairy rock or, an alpha Kirchen, an elf church,
Hmm.
um, and won't go at certain places at certain times. And, you know, like I don't believe in it, but
Just to be safe, I don't feel like being picked up and scattered off either. So,
right.
what's some of the most interesting stories that you've heard? Like, do you have any compiled that people have
Oh,
told you over the years?
there's so many.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
I mean, I've had some personal experiences myself, and
Oh,
this
wonderful.
this is a subject that, of course, I've written about and I teach about. So I do have people who reach out to me and talk about, the things they've experienced. I was in Ireland with some friends in 2016, I think it was, and one of my friends in the group we were with had gone out kind of twilight, dusk, and was walking down this little road by the place we were staying at, and there's some woods off to the side, and he comes back in kind of looking a little shaken, and he's like, yeah, there were voices in the woods asking me to come join them.
Oh,
And
great.
um right, and he's a musician, and that's actually, there's a ton of folklore about stuff like that where they would kind of borrow musicians or, try to lure them away.
Oh,
um so that was, when he told me that, I was like, oh dear, don't go.
it's really, yeah, stay away from the woods.
Right,
That
right.
that's really interesting.
And it definitely wasn't humans, just to be clear.
Yeah, that's really it baffles me because it's I have heard tidbits of things like that, through the many years of my doing, I do like anything otherworldly for research and people have said here and there, not just going into the woods, but just sometimes just being by themselves somewhere near the water on a beach. They feel like they'll hear voices, like even out on the water,
Mhm.
like beckoning them. And it's like, that's just crazy. Like, what could be out there? Sea nymph, or is this a mermaid, or are there water fairies, or can they go into the water? Can they reside there? Like maybe that was a thing.
Sure. Again, depending on where we're looking at, but
Yeah,
for Ireland, for example, you have selkies, which are,
the
um,
Selkies. Yes,
yep, they can appear as humans on land, but
yes,
they're seals when they're in the water.
right.
Um, and they are known to interact with people. They'll save people who are drowning or whose ships have gone down.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yep. There's stories about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have what we would call mermaids in
Mm-hmm.
English, basically.
Yes, yes.
Um, some fresh water and some salt water. So, even
Well,
if you're at a
they're
lake,
pretty. They're everywhere, right? Yeah, it's just that anything goes, this kind of thing. So that wow,
yeah,
that's I'm just when I kind of go like, wow, it's because my head sometimes gets ahead of my mouth. And it's like, all
right.
right, I've got to make sense of it.
It is a lot. It is a lot. I mean,
It is
I've been researching this actively for something like 30 years, and the
right.
more academic end of it for, 10 to 20. And
Mm,
there's just so much of it. There's so much folklore and so many stories. And like you said, a lot of it is oral. A lot of
mm,
it you have to really look into, talking directly to people or reading firsthand accounts,
mm,
um, because that's where we find, the kind of core of all this and the
mm-hmm.
personal experiences.
That's it's something. Yeah, it's such an old. Like I said, it's just old, and yet people are still having a lot of experiences even to this day. Now, do you find this to be a little bit like in modern days? People will look at obviously the popularity of fairies, and you get into what is it? I had to read this again. I've never heard of zeitgeist. Is that is that similar to like what we would consider a tulpa? Just people. Like a tulpa is something, for example, like Slender Man. It was just an idea that was formed, and over time, a group of people just kept adding to it. And this all of a sudden, this thing's got a personality. It's got attributes. It does this, it does that, and they believe like there have actually been sightings of this thing. So it's
Kind of
been
takes on a life of its own.
Yes, yes. Do you find that in some places fairies fall under this whole tulpa theory?
I think when we're talking about the more established ones, the older folklore, the places where they've had these beliefs for a really long time, I would be hesitant to say exactly what those beings are.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that particularly in the modern zeitgeist, if you will,
Yes.
since you use the word, I'll use it too.
Yes, of course. Of course.
I definitely think some of those modern pop culture ideas of
Mm-hmm.
fairies have taken on that life of their own, and now
Mm-hmm.
people are seeing and experiencing them. For example, the idea of fairies having wings is actually really recent. They
Oh.
never did in folklore. They never did in mythology. It started, if I remember correctly, in the theater a few hundred years ago, and then kind of worked its way into artwork and then into fiction. But once it kind of hit that point where it was saturating mass media and people are seeing images of fairies with wings and reading stories of fairies with wings, and
Mm-hmm.
now of course we have cartoons of fairies with wings,
Yes.
then we start seeing the anecdotal accounts
Yes.
coming up.
Right.
And you actually, as far as I'm aware,
Mm.
you won't find anecdotal accounts of people talking about tiny winged fairies until the later 20th century. The 1970s, 1980s
Mm.
is when you first kind of start to see it. And I think that's a great example of what you were just talking about.
Yes.
You
Just
know,
something manifesting, and next thing you know,
yeah,
we have this aggressive little Tinkerbell character. So it's like, not so cute. you know, that's really interesting. So they've evolved the being into something that's really maybe something more pleasing, not so fearful.
yeah.
Because I mean, God, older folklore states like they could be really aggressive.
Mhm. Oh yeah. They in the older stories, which is kind of funny in contrast to what we
Yeah.
have in the more modern terms.
Mm.
In the older stories, they could be pretty vicious and um, cruel in that sort of casual way, like a cat with a mouse,
Right.
you know.
Right. Right.
Um, and so we have a lot of stories where, and anecdotal accounts as well,
Right.
uh, where they're seeming to act very inexplicably to us, to humans,
Mm.
and blinding people or
Oh,
beating them
wow.
or all sorts of things.
How,
Yeah, there's
is there something that sets them off? I have to ask because honestly, I travel a lot, and I would hate to end up in like knee deep in the poop bucket to get my butt handed to me by a fairy. So,
yeah. I mean, usually when we look across the folklore, usually
mm,
the most often when this occurs, it's because the human in question has done something,
mm,
whether it's, you damaged a fairy tree or you, you know, took something that was theirs
or
and
trespass.
yeah, or
That's
trespassed,
right.
or refused to do something that you're being
Mm,
asked to do for people who have the actual,
mm,
face-to-face sort of encounters.
right.
Um, and their response to that is usually not particularly good. Um, the reason in Ireland with the fairy tree is that people really won't mess with them is because the belief is very strong that they'll kill you if you do. Um,
Wow. Wow.
and sometimes it might take a little while. It's not always like the next day you keel over, but
Oh, so you become prey and they just follow you around and toy with you for a while. It
yeah,
it
sometimes,
it kind of
sometimes.
reminds me of the old Samhain stories, of fairies coming in and taking souls to hell, basically. And if they catch you, you're sort of fair game. So everybody would just sort of, what's the old tale that goes with that? If they would take their coat on and put it on backwards,
Oh,
apparently this would deter the
yep.
fairies from taking them.
Yep, there's a couple different ways in folk belief if the fairies are messing with you,
Mm,
if you're being fairy led, which is when you get lost in a familiar location, or
mm-hmm,
if they're trying to take you away,
mm-hmm.
turning your jacket the other way around or
Yes,
inside out,
yes,
turning gloves inside out,
yes.
carrying any iron on you. Uh,
And why would that be? They seem to be like a very intelligent species or beings. How could, in your opinion, like just putting your gloves on inside out, like to me, that would just be like, what? I'd look at them like, what are you doing? You know?
it seems to have to do with representing a reversal of the
Oh, okay, that
situation.
would make sense. Yeah.
So if you're
Yes.
kind of stuck in this enchanted state and you're, being
Hmm.
affected by them, and then you turn your clothes around, you turn your
Hmm.
clothes inside out. The idea is that it's breaking that influence,
Right.
that energy.
And the iron.
Iron is very, very old. This goes back 2,000 years. We actually have a Roman writer who mentions it, and then all across the Celtic countries and the Norse countries as well.
Hmm.
The idea that they can't stand iron, they won't be
Wow.
anywhere around it. Um, and that was actually true historically for ghosts and for any kind of malevolent spirit, as well as fairies.
Does it work on aliens?
That's a good question. Um,
Asking for a friend.
yeah,
There you
that
go.
I see your friend.
Yeah,
That I don't
asking for a
know.
friend.
Uh, there's a gentleman by the name of Joshua Cutchins who does a lot with the alien material, alien folklore, I would call it. Everything's folklore to me.
Right.
But he has kind of discussed a little bit of the crossover with fairies in a few of his books. So I would have to like pass that question along.
No, that's interesting. I'd love to pick his brain too. Just like, if it works on this and this, I'm down to try. Like, a spear or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Um,
actually why old churchyards, you'll see this a lot in Europe, are always have iron fences.
wow, I did not know that. For fairies or
Um,
evil
for
spirits
yeah,
and
for fairies, evil spirits, ghosts, it's supposed to be so they can't pass that.
okay, Wayne, if you're listening, we need to get the gates up. We need to get the iron fence back up. Sorry. Yeah.
Here's a fun story. Since you asked me earlier about
Yeah.
stories that I've heard, I was doing an interview a really long time ago, and a woman had called in, and she was actually asking for some help to do with fairy stuff because she'd bought a house that had been empty for a little while, and that
Hmm.
can be a bit of a fairy magnet in a way.
Oh.
They tend to like human spaces that are abandoned
Oh.
for any length of time.
Hmm.
But she moved in and she started putting up all this wrought iron, sort of fixing the place up, putting up wrought iron fencing and stuff. And she was standing on a retaining wall on the property and got shoved off the wall
Oh.
and fell and broke her arm.
Hmm.
So that's what she was kind of wanting to know what to do. And I was like, maybe take down some of the iron. might be
You're
might be upsetting
aggravating
them a
them.
tad.
You're aggravating the fairies. Get the iron down. So,
Yep.
is there any way to appease them? Like, I mean, if I buy a house tomorrow and there's a friggin' fairy in it, like, is there any way to appease this thing so it just like doesn't try to like knock me down a flight of stairs or something? Or like, can you coexist? I guess is
Sure.
probably what I'm saying.
Sure. Really, the bulk of fairy beliefs and practices that we have across
Mhm.
history are aimed at that. Like, how do we coexist,
How do we coexist?
and not get shoved down flights of stairs? And,
Right.
the main thing seems to be, don't speak disrespectfully of them because
Right.
that they don't ever appreciate. And they're very fond of dairy products.
So
So,
leave him a glass of milk or a bowl of
yep,
milk.
yep, milk, cream,
Oh,
butter.
that is insane. And who figured that out?
That is one of those things that goes back over 1,000 years.
Really?
Mhm.
That's that old.
Yep, yep. We see it in Iceland as well, but in the Irish material in particular, there's into the mythology. There's stories about when the fairies were first driven, when the Aishi, the people of the fairy hills, were first driven into the hills out of the mortal world by humans.
Hmm.
None of the crops would grow, none of the cows would give milk, and this was clearly a problem.
Wow.
So they kind of came to this agreement that humans would give them a portion of the harvest and a portion of the milk, and they would not interfere in a negative way, and let everything
That's
work.
insane.
Yep. And that's something, like I said, 1,000 years ago in mythology, but then we find it in the
Mm.
20th century in folk beliefs. You could talk to people in Ireland, and there's a book that came out in the 1960s that the author had gone around and talked to people, and there were people talking about the tithes to the fairies, the percentage that was owed to the fairies.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a belief that's still around.
Wow. Well, what's the oldest account of fairy acknowledgement, I guess?
The oldest account in Western Europe that I
Yeah.
know of
Mm.
is from Ireland. It's a story called the Extra Conla, which means the Adventures of Conla.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically tells the story of Conla, who's the son of the king of Ireland. And he and his father and a bunch of his father's people are standing out one day, and he sees this beautiful woman coming up to them, and she
Mm-hmm.
starts talking to him. No one else can see her or hear
Mm-hmm.
her, but they hear him, his side of the conversation, talking to her. And she tells him that she's a fairy woman, that she's a woman of fairy, and she wants him to go back with her. And clearly that is not okay with his dad.
Yeah, right.
uh,
Oh.
and his dad's druid, who's kind of like the court magician, court magic worker,
Mm-hmm.
does some things so that he can't see her anymore. And she goes away for a month and then comes back, and he ends up leaving with her. He goes away with her and is never seen again. And that is, as far as I know, that dates to about the 5th century.
Oh, wow.
The oldest written account is the 9th, but based on the language, they believe it goes back in the oral
The oral
material.
history. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, to about the 5th century.
Yeah.
So,
That's an old
uh,
one.
yeah, that's the oldest one. And
Wow.
good old-fashioned abduction.
Yeah. Missing 411 in modern times. This has happened back in the 5th century. Oh my
The very
gosh.
first missing 411.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, crazy question. So black-eyed children then.
Yep.
What is your take on that? Because Joe will tell you, because Joe's ufologist, that they're ETs. Paranormal people will say, nope, they're little demon kids. How do they fit into the fairy research?
Well, probably unsurprisingly, I'm sure this will not be a shock to anyone. My view tends to be that they could be a
Right.
type of fairy. Anytime we're dealing with the more modern sorts of beings, whether we're talking cryptids or,
Mm.
the urban stories or black-eyed children, it is definitely a big gray zone trying to figure out kind of where they fit in. But
Yeah, the
they
gray zone. Yeah.
yeah.
That's my other show. Thanks, Joe and I.
Oh, well,
Like,
good.
thank you
Well,
for that.
little promo there.
Yeah.
Um, but the black-eyed children, at least the accounts that I have read,
Yes.
they do line up with what we see in older fairy folklore. The idea that they can't come in unless you let them in.
Like a
Uh,
vampire.
yep, yep.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
that they appear as children, but there's something off about them. Like in a lot of accounts, their clothing is not
Mhm.
modern. It's out of date, and that's a big fairy thing. In a lot
Right.
of fairy encounters where people see fairies that look fairly human, one of the giveaways is that they're not dressed in a contemporary fashion. It's
Mhm.
like a generation or two out of date. I like to joke if you were to see a fairy today, it would probably be wearing like tie-dye and bell bottoms.
Oh, so yeah, they just can't keep up, is what you're
Right,
saying.
right. There's a little bit of a lag.
Okay. Okay.
But so the idea of these black-eyed children wearing clothing that's a little out of date or a little
And the
odd.
dark eyes, do fairies have dark eyes?
Some
Or
of them do.
oh, okay.
They
Okay.
can have particular features that are not human features.
Yeah.
Um, so things like all black eyes would be an example.
Mm-hmm.
Across the folklore, we'll also see things like feet that are turned backwards.
Oh,
Um, you know,
I've read that.
things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I've read that. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah.
but
That is a
black
thing.
eyes would not be, out of
Mm.
the realm of possibility.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and then that
God.
sort of trying to trick you into
Mm-hmm.
doing something for them or giving them something.
Because they are
Again,
known to be tricksters also, like just in general, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. One beats going down a flight of stairs. It's like, okay, what do you want? I'll work it
Milk.
out.
Just give them some milk.
Yeah, give them the milk. Throw a piece of iron at them. I don't know. Put iron in the milk. Maybe that could work. I don't know. I just get the whole brood after you, though. Okay. So let's like I see here that you make mention of cryptids or modern legends. Um, do we figure that there's a connection between all that too?
I wouldn't necessarily say all of it, um,
Some, yeah.
but I do think some.
Hmm.
Like chupacabra is an example that I often give of
Okay.
something that if you just look at the stories of it, that would fit in with the wider patterns of
Mm-hmm.
some fairy folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a friend who's very adamant that Mothman has some fairy overlap.
But that one almost could get away with being, if you're saying that they have full size humanoid
Mhm.
ones, I mean, that could be a possibility. People don't really seem to have that much of an explanation for it, other than, well, it's a demon or it's a big moth guy. It's just, it's like there's not really I mean, there's a lot of studies being done on it. Don't get me wrong, but I think that your theory or your friend's theory is just as valid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the really fun thing, in my opinion, with the modern material and things
Mm,
like cryptids and urban legends, and it's basically new folklore and trying to figure out sort of how are we going to categorize it or how are we going to understand it, what
mhm,
lens are we going to see it through. To me, that's just super interesting.
mhm.
You
Well,
know.
sky's the limit, I think, when you're dealing with anything that's pretty otherworldly. Unless you manage to lasso one and say to the world, "Hey, here we go." I don't really think that hypothesizing as to what they are or what they're linked with is really out of the question. You know.
Well, I think the only way we're going to figure it out is hypothesizing.
Yeah, well,
And
it's pretty much all we can do at this point. It's like people will say to me when I'm doing interviews for other people, you know, how do you know that, this is real or ghosts are real? Or how do you know this is on the other side? Or I don't know, just like come back and let you know when I get there. There's just
right.
there's no real answer for a question like that, and I think this is sort of the same when it comes to um, cryptids or just again ancient folklore. I believe that there's something to be said for oral history. It's like it started somewhere, and people talk about vampires and werewolves and we have sightings like all over the place of Dogman, like,
Mhm.
well, that's a type of werewolf, you know. Vampires, same, are they extraterrestrial or we don't know. Are they interdimensional beings? We don't know, but the story started somewhere,
Right.
and when people came over and immigrated to this part of the world, all of that ancient belief system came with them.
Mhm. Oh yeah, the United States is particularly an interesting place to be because you have everything that's native to here,
Yes.
everything that's been here for tens of thousands of years, And then you have everything that's kind of come over as
Yeah.
different populations have shifted and moved around.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have so many different possible encounters and possible things going on. And then we have this new material,
Mm-hmm.
the black-eyed children and the chupacabra and
Mm-hmm.
Slender Man and all this other stuff that's kind of showing up. And is it all one thing? Is it all the same thing, just taking on different appearances? Is
Mm-hmm.
it different things? Is it different related things? Completely different things?
Mm-hmm.
It's really fascinating to dig into it and
Mm-hmm.
try to get an idea. Um, and I think there's a lot of theories out there, and they're all worth
Well,
discussing.
you've written 12 books, so there must be a lot to research. I mean, my
There
gosh,
is.
it's like there's no start and there's no finish,
No,
really.
no. Oh no, this is something that, I could study for another 50 years and I
Mm-hmm.
still wouldn't be able to get all of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much to it. And
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a whole movement of people who follow this, who believe this. I've dabbled in looking at some of even social media pages, and some people end up taking videos. And I have to say, I mean, now it's so easy with modern technology. You just have to have a cell phone, and you can pretty much do anything, that you couldn't do, 15, 20 years ago. But some of it looks really compelling.
mhm, mhm.
Like I was looking at one, people going, oh, that's just a bug. And again, it looks like I was saying earlier. But when it's on video, it's a little bit different. I mean, I could clearly see little wings,
Mhm.
oddly enough, but what looked like little human legs.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to fudge a video as it is to fudge a photograph.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think as we continue moving forward
Mm-hmm.
and as the technology gets better and more people are kind of out there, like you said, with their cell phones recording
Yes.
things,
Yes.
I think we eventually are going to get some solid evidence. I'm a big proponent for people who are interested in fairies or, kind of trying to find evidence of fairies, encouraging them to look into what ghost hunters use, their equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's a lot of potential crossover there
Mm-hmm.
for, the same thing that people are using,
Mm-hmm.
same technology to try to find evidence of ghosts, apply that at fairy locations or
Mm-hmm.
apply that in encounters, in places that you're supposed to have fairies and see what you can find.
And I guess that's probably my next question because you've kind of kind of leading me there is what exactly is a fairy location? Like some people will do up fairy gardens and
Hmm.
things like that, fairy springs, or again the rock circles. People will
Yep.
do those. Um, I'm assuming this is a way of attracting them. Is there something specifically that they gravitate to? What makes an area a fairy area?
A lot of them, particularly in Ireland and the UK and Iceland and I guess you'd say Europe more generally,
Yes.
a lot of them are just historic. They've kind of always had that association.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Humans sort of instinctively sense or know that that particular place or that particular thing is not exactly for humans. It's that
Mm-hmm.
sort of instinctual feeling to it. But people do also do certainly, as you said, create places.
Or
Uh,
little fairy doors on trees and such. Yeah.
yep, yep. With the idea of trying to
Mm-hmm.
bring this energy in or, draw it. And I think that that's definitely going to have some success sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how much success, I think, is going to depend on a lot of things. It's like setting up a bird feeder.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yes. Yes.
have to wait
Um,
and see what happens. Uh,
yeah, I'm not so sure I want to try, but
yeah, I'm not
all your
necessarily
stories, I'm
recommending that
kind of
anyone
like,
does.
yeah, I think I'm good. But
Yeah.
is there any architectural evidence? I mean, were they builders at all? Have people gone into the woods, let's say, to see things that maybe looked a little peculiar, or were there areas that, like I'm going to say, like the Grotto King, the Fairy King's Grotto, like are there things like that that are more fairy generated, not so much man-made? Do you know of any? Have you heard of any?
I mean, there's certainly places that are supposed to be or are rumored to be.
Mm-hmm.
It gets a little dicey knowing what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Ireland, in Sligo, there's a mountain called Ben Bulben, and there's a white rectangle on the side of the mountain that's called the Fairy Door,
Mm-hmm.
and it's inaccessible to humans. It's not in the location that humans can
Oh,
get to.
right.
Um, but that is supposed to be something that the fairies created. It's theirs. It definitely is odd,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
yeah, because I mean, if you're getting, beings that are have magical capabilities, or are, like like human and humanoid, basically, so they're fairly big, they could realistically build all kinds of things, but it's like anything else, what gets left over after, all of these centuries is, but sometimes you just see things that's like, where did that come from? It's
yeah,
just, it's just not necessarily man-made,
yeah.
but of course everybody looks to the stars, but I don't know.
Well,
Um,
and I think the tricky part with fairies too with this is how would we really know if you have something that is Neolithic or seems to be really far back in time.
mhm,
Um, did humans make it? Did something else make it?
mhm.
I think we always tend to assume humans for obvious
Obvious
reasons.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yes. No, for
Um,
sure. For sure. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. It's just, you can look at something. I've traveled many parts of the world, and to be honest, I could look at something and kind of go, it would be the same. It wasn't until I did go to the UK where I started noticing it more. When you look back to the story, and it just eludes me at the moment. I'm sure you know it because you study it. The story of the little girls in England, I believe it was, who had experiences with fairies
oh,
and their fairy garden.
the
And
Cottingley fairies.
yes, that it seems to be very controversial. Some people say yes, it happened. Other people say no, that was just made up. That's not a thing. They were trying to get attention. Have you researched into that at all?
Yep. It's quite the to do, as they say,
Yes.
in the fairy
Yeah.
community, and it was particularly I think because Sir Arthur Conan Doyle backed them.
Oh,
He was
I
a
didn't know that.
very oh yes, he was a very adamant believer in fairies.
Hmm.
And when the girls came forward and they had their photographic evidence, of course, it immediately caused a lot of controversy,
Hmm.
with some people saying they were faked and some people saying
But
that they
those are
weren't.
old photos. Those are
Yeah.
really hard to fake.
Yep. The girls, or one of the girls, I should say, later, I believe this from the 80s, when she was very elderly, admitted that some of the pictures they had faked, that they had done cutouts and like drawn them. But she
Right,
was very insistent that not all of them were faked,
right.
that they did have at least one or two, if I remember correctly, that were genuine and that they had only faked the others because of the demand for more. Um,
Um,
so, and then of course, there's the whole issue of was that a genuine confession or was she just, you know,
yeah, yeah.
saying it
That's
for whatever reason? So,
yeah, because that was probably one of the more famous stories. And again, it's just funny because the wings,
yep, yep, the
right?
Cottingley Ferry hoax that happened in, I want to say it was like 1914.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was the early 20th century. I just can't remember the
Yes,
exact year.
yes.
Um, but yeah, no, that to this day, there are still people. I think it generally is now assumed to have been a hoax, but there are still people who believe that
Mm-hmm.
at least some of the photos were real. And the girls were very adamant the entire time, and they never recanted that they had had the experience and they had seen the fairies.
Mm-hmm.
The issue became the photographs and the legitimacy of the photographs. So
Mm-hmm. They should have quit while they were ahead. Yeah.
they should have. They should have. But I mean,
Yeah.
hey, it still has people 100 years later, talking about it and talking about fairies. So
No, it's true. It's true. Trying to get photographic evidence. Like I said, I think you see things surfacing a little bit now. But it's, you just, they can fudge things so easily. That's why when I saw the video, I kind of thought, oh, that's interesting. But then when you say, well, no, there wasn't even an account of fairies with wings until a certain time. And then all of a sudden now, even then with the girls, all of a sudden these fairies have wings. So it's like, how? you know, um, unless they were just something where they just well hidden before and never made their way out, or what is it like? Is it something that has been manifested by everyone?
yep, I mean, there definitely is the theory that, well, I should say there's kind of two big theories.
Mm-hmm.
One is that fairies by nature are sort of malleable and open to the influence of the human imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So humans kind of en masse affect the direction of how these beings evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that they sort of shape themselves to the human expectations, which I guess would lean into the Tulpa theory or the Egregore
A little
theory.
bit, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Um, the other viewpoint, though, is that because these are beings who are shapeshifters,
Mm-hmm.
because these are beings who can affect human perception,
Mm-hmm.
who can sort of fool our senses in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
that they will um, appear in ways that the humans expect them to appear in.
That makes
So,
sense. Yeah, that
so
makes sense.
if you have humans who are primed to
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, fairies have wings,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to get fairies that have wings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas if you don't have that expectation, you're going to get something different. The anecdotal accounts that I find the most interesting are accounts from skeptics and people who didn't believe until
Mm-hmm.
they had the encounter. Because they're more of a blank slate, I think.
Well, I don't want to believe in anything unless you're. I mean, I have met and worked with a lot of open-minded skeptics, so they're a little bit easier to work with. But then you just have some people who's like, no, it's not a thing.
Right.
It gets slapped in the face and go, don't know what it was, not a thing. you know, and I do respect everyone's point of view. I do. I'm just of the mind that it would be silly to think that we are the only ones on this planet. I mean, we have evolved in a different way. Um, but,
Oh
you know,
yeah, yeah. Well, and if you look, globally, the idea of humans around the world
mm-hmm,
interacting across history
mm-hmm,
with non-human beings, non-human spirits, non-human,
mm-hmm,
whatever you want to call them,
mm-hmm,
um, it's such a universal concept,
mm-hmm,
you know. And to me, I guess that's where my belief is kind of anchored. That how can you have every single culture,
mm-hmm,
every single group of humans everywhere have this concept
mm-hmm,
that there is something that's not human that interacts with humans,
mm-hmm.
for good, for bad, for whatever, if there isn't some truth to that somewhere.
I agree. Tolkien himself, I think when he came up with, the whole Middle Earth thing and, the elves, and there are a lot of Tolkien believers or followers who believe that he had some kind of an experience or had been in contact with somebody who had an experience or had even been
Mhm.
to this area. Like this was a thing, that it wasn't just an imagination.
Right, because it's so richly detailed
Oh yes.
and complex.
It
Yeah,
it
for sure.
is. It is, and it just seems to fit the bill when you start researching,
Yep.
in modern day. But apparently he was very well aware of some of these the ancient,
Mhm.
more ancient texts, or experiences or sightings. So it makes you wonder, like, was he made privy to something that the rest of us just were not?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. And his writing, there are a couple religious systems now based
Hmm.
on um the things, because he in his books they're so detailed
Yes.
that you really can take it and use his religious systems as a workable system. And
Mm-hmm.
that's impressive for someone who, was
Hmm.
not intending to do that,
No, no,
allegedly.
exactly. Very much ahead of his time, you
Yeah.
know. Um, Joe, did you want to add anything? Joe just figured he'd co-host, and my
What?
co-host is not
I'm
here.
just here for color.
Are you
Okay.
just here for color and like
Yeah, see all the festive colors around. Like, of course, me
ambiance?
and Bob. Bob had to come in and say hi.
Yeah.
He,
Hi,
he
Bob.
wanted he wanted to come visit tonight. He was hanging out. I said, no, I was just listening.
I
I
just
just
figure, what do you think? Because you deal with extraterrestrials,
Man, we we
essentially.
we we barbecue fairies down here in the south.
They
We go get a little
barbecue
pixie
everything in
dust
the
and
freaking South, okay?
the barbecue
Everything.
sauce. I'm just
No, you guys
saying, it's
eat
one of them
anything
things.
over there. I'm
We
just
do, we
saying.
do. Actually, we've
With
got
all due respect, I'm just saying.
we coon asses. We eat anything. We can't help ourselves. It's just one of them things, man. It's the deep South. New Orleans is famous for its food and its cooking, and that's why they're famous, because they'll eat any damn thing. The first time I ever ate escargot, I was like, "What is this? This is delicious." And then they told me what it was. I was like, "Oh my God, really?" I was like, "Snails, really, people?" I didn't know. Who wants to eat snails? I'm like, "Come on!" But hey, they were good, so I can't say anything.
So
But
what's a
it's
fairy on a spit, right? It's like,
yeah, I know it's a little funny, but it's funny because we get a lot of people from Europe that contact us a lot. I mean, currently we're about 80,000 cases, and probably a good 30, 25, 30 of them are from Europe, the entire place. But when you get into England itself, I should say the Britain Isle. So we'll get people that call in, and they call them the little people. Sometimes they call them the fairies, and sometimes they call them the greys. My problem with all this is either any of the three definitions could be correct, because the descriptions a lot of time are really close together. So, so is it fairies that have been just coming forward and now have just transformed themselves into something different so they don't get caught? Is it grays that have been lying to us the entire time, or is it something else? So it's just hard to know, and that's why I don't ever criticize anybody, because it's a coin flip.
hmm.
Because I mean, there's evidence for all of it. I mean, there truly is. There's been evidence of something going on this planet since man was able to record it. Matter of fact, I was watching a TV series earlier, some cave they found from 35,000 years ago with all these. So they had all these pictures of all the animals that lived in the Amazon Valley, right? And then they had things that looked like ghosts or maybe dead walkers. I don't know what the hell they were. They definitely weren't any normal animals. So they were also so. And this was just things they had seen that they had put on the walls. Obviously, seen something that freaked it out, and they put it separate from where the animals and all were. So it was something important to them. Maybe it was a ritual. I don't know, but it was creepy looking. And see those kind of things. That's why you always got to take the ancients serious. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it gets exaggerated over the years, like everything does, but
Mm.
there's just too many accounts of little people and these little things coming around, and then there used to be a big argument, a cross between elves and fairies, and they said, well, maybe they crisscrossed each other. I said, no, I think they're two separate things. I'm like,
Mm.
I said, unless there's bigger fairies, which I don't know how big they actually
There
get. So
are. Morgan says there are, like
see,
humans.
well, you see, that just makes it more confusing, because the fairies and the elves might be having children, and God, they might be the damn greys as far as we know. I'm just saying, it gets complicated.
It could
But
be a
that
thing.
happens. It does.
It could be a thing.
All of the above.
Yeah,
Yeah, I choose
that's
D.
the hard part.
Or can I
That's why I
phone
don't
a
rule out
friend?
anything. I was doing a lecture just a couple of months, just before COVID started. I shouldn't say a couple months, almost a year ago now. But we were doing a lecture, and somebody asked me, "Well, couldn't they be the little people?" I said, "Well, yeah, but what the hell are the little people?" And they're like, "Well, what do you mean, what are the little?" I said, "Well, I don't know what the little people." I said,
That's a
"The
North
little people could
American
be
thing
anything."
too, though. Yeah, we
You
have
know,
those in Canada also. Our indigenous
Oh,
really
Amelia
talk a
does
lot
not
about
count
little
as a little
people.
people. Stop that. Bad, Michelle. Bad,
What?
Michelle.
What?
Amelia does not count as a little people. You said you got those in Canada. She's a little people, so you can't
My
count her.
co-host Amelia, yeah.
She like
So
she like 4 foot nothing.
Doesn't make her that little of a person.
That's a little people, man. 4 foot's a little people. Especially where I come from. Everybody down, even the women down here are 6'2" and stuff, man. It's like living in Valhalla or something when you're down in this part of the country, man. Everybody's just, it's just weird looking. Especially you get into like the middle of the South. Everybody's blonde hair, blue eyed. You'd think it was Nazi Germany or something, like 6'2". Male, female, it doesn't matter. You're like walking around going, yeah, okay, and where am I at? Did I fall into Viking land or something?
You
time
just
traveling.
You just stepped out. You just stepped
But they
out
do locally,
in time.
some of the swamps describes pixies or fairies. Actually, they're associated with a lot of the old voodoo and hoodoo rituals. They said sometimes in the deep swamp, when they would start doing spells, you would see like a rush of lightning bugs come up. But when you got closer, you realized they were small little pixies or fairies. And Marie Laveau talks about them. Quite a few of the old voodoo people talked about them. They all had different terms for them, but they were the same damn thing. Mm-hmm. And I still don't know what they are. I mean, fairies is as good a word as anything else for them, because I don't know what they were. And but there's lots and lots of descriptions. And sometimes you'll be walking through the swamp late at night, and you'll see these weird color things just cruising through the swamp at high speed. Now, it gets confusing because we get a lot of swamp gas in here. So you'll get these real purple and yellow and pink and green. Looks like little blobs moving through the swamp. Well, that's definitely swamp gas. But you get other things. And they're very colorful, whatever they are. They just go zipping along. And I know a few people said you can hear them like it's like a high pitch. They're either talking too fast or their voices are so low that it sounds like a squeal to most people. I don't know. I've never had any talk to me. And if I did, I'd probably wake up the shotgun and say, y'all look tasty to me, guys. We're going to have lunch.
Okay. I just have a question coming through, so I'm just waiting. They're struggling with chat a little bit here. So yes. I'm just like, okay, well, try again.
If it's a recipe for pixies, I can't help you.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. She says, I can't be sacrificing my brother here.
Exactly.
This is regular pixie dust.
I'll wait on it just to see. Just text it if you can't get it in chat. How about that? Easy.
So,
yeah, our
indigenous number. People, wait, come on now. Y'all can't be texting me. I don't even know who the hell this is. So,
okay. Okay, here's.
Oh, wait. Before y'all go. So this is at your guest. They said, why do Germans describe fairies different than the people in the British Isle? I know that's your question, not mine.
There actually is a lot of similarity and crossover because the Celtic and Germanic cultures are very similar. They're kind of like cousins culturally. So what we find in the Germanic material is actually not that far off. Just a different versions. Like their house fairies, house spirits are not exactly the same as what we would see in like Scotland. But the elves, Germanic elves, Elben is what they're called in German, are actually extremely similar to what we would call fairies, folkloric fairies, or the Aeshe, Danashi in Irish. Mm-hmm. They're not too different. There's a handful of things like in the German, they're known to do things like go through knotholes in the wooden walls or keyholes in doors to get from one room to another. That's a German thing. I've not found that.
That's interesting.
In other kinds of folklore. There's a really interesting story from Germanic folklore from Germany of a elf woman who passes through the lock in the door and comes in, and there's a gentleman living in the home, and she just sort of moves in, and they have, I think it's 4 children together. Wow. And then one day, a certain number of years later, she just leaves the same way she came and is never seen again.
And left the children with them. And oh wow, that's fascinating. Well, before I get to the next question, I am going to do a sponsor ID. So people, You are listening to The Outer Realm here on the United Public Radio Network via UFO Paranormal Radio 107.7 FM here in New Orleans. Huge thank you to Folgers Coffee, who are partially sponsoring tonight's show. Thank you, Folgers. Love you. And we are back. I have another question. It's a bit lengthy, though. So, okay, a story that came out in the UK about a boy and a girl that arrived in an old village that had green skin and were very small.
The Green Children of Woolpit. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, there you go. I didn't have to finish that. Yeah, that's what he says. He says, there was another child that lived on for many years with the family in the village, wondering if they could be part of the fairy clan. So you know the story. Yeah.
Yep. They are generally considered to be fairies. The story is sort of if you get any book on fairy folklore, English folklore, or more generally, they're probably going to mention the Green Children of Woolpit at some point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a boy and a girl who wandered out of a cave, and they both had a green tint to their skin. Mm-hmm. Initially, could not speak any intelligible language. They wouldn't eat anything but beans. And the boy died after a short period of time. The girl lived, eventually learned English, was baptized, kind of integrated into human society. She lost the green tint to her skin. Was always considered, I believe the accounts describe her as a little wild. So she never adopted that Christian morality. We'll just put it that way. No. She said that they had come from a land that was very different from Earth, that it had no sun, that it's generally considered to be fairy, and that they had gotten lost wandering in these caves and eventually had emerged into this strange world, which of course was England.
Right. So Middle Earth theory then, or extraterrestrial, like above or below?
Interdimensional. It's hard to say, but it's quite interesting because it's considered a historic account. It was recorded sort of in the history of that town, but it's also been passed on and survived in folklore, and it's one of the more well-known stories that's out there.
So it's never been disproved. It's I mean, this is a thing.
It happened in I believe it was the 12th or the 13th century. So it was quite a long time ago.
To have the accounts. Yes. Yeah. It sounds like they would have come through like a portal or a Stargate or something,
something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm sure. I wonder how many stories there are out there that you don't know. Our thing is with oral history is if it stops at some point, you just don't, it's just gone forever. You see it with even the indigenous people of our time. It seems as though, I've heard that, young people just don't seem to be as interested in the stories anymore. And it's hard to tell them, like, they don't want to keep moving them on. And they don't write everything down. Some stories are meant to continue on as oral history.
We got a request from Sharon in Cork, Ireland. She says that there's 2 little fairies that come visit her husband and turn into beautiful women. She says she does this thing where she tries to shoo them off, and sometimes they leave, but when she falls asleep, she can hear them. They make some like they're singing before there's some kind of singing before they appear. She said, any ways to keep them out of the house?
Iron. Yeah.
There you go, iron people. There you go.
Get the gates up.
Put some iron gates on your damn windows and your doors. Is all I can tell you, people.
Iron horseshoes over the doors.
Put some iron in your husband's pocket, the pervert. There you go. There you go. That'll stop it right there. Look, see.
So that's why they would put horseshoes over the doorways.
Mm-hmm.
She said she thinks he's an elf or something because he's 6'3", flaming red hair and emerald green eyes, and lily white skin. That's just more information than I needed. I mean, sorry. Just more.
It would explain why the fairy ladies like him.
Oh, see, there you go. Mm-hmm. That's why I said put some iron in his pocket.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
No.
Iron the
Tied
pajamas.
around his neck like a little doggy chain or something. I don't know. Get it. You know what? Go buy him a little emlet that's made out of iron. He don't need to know what it's made out of. Just give it to him. Say, if you take it off, honey, we get divorced.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
So
I mean, sometimes fairies just like a particular person.
Yeah, well, she said sometimes they leave marks on him and stuff.
Yeah.
She said they got in a big fight because he had a hickey on his neck. And she said,
and he
well,
blamed
wait.
it on the fairy lady?
Well, no, he didn't blame it on the fairy. He said he had no idea how it got there. They were fighting nonstop, right? That's what she said. She said, no, we were fighting. And then he slept on the couch and I slept in the bedroom. And when I got up in the middle of the night, I seen these two wispy women around 5-6 foot tall hovering over him. And she looked like she was biting him or kissing him. And I just freaked and screamed, and they freaked and left. She said that I kind of just puffed and left. I was like, okay. I don't know. I mean, my wife teaches a shotgun is all I'm saying.
Well, a shotgun would also be effective.
Iron bullets.
Yeah, there is a whole sort of layer of fairy folklore around. They're called Lananshi, fairy lovers. And some of them are more dangerous than others. Some of them will kind of inspire a person, but also kind of shorten your lifespan.
Oh, so they just like suck the life out of you for real?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
And then there's a sort that, they just are fond of humans in a carnal fashion. So either way, iron should fix that.
Yeah, you should fix that. Yeah, don't do the milk.
Yeah, no.
The cream, because they might think you're making an invitation. So, like, wow, that's insane. See, that's an insane story. That's modern.
Yep.
In Ireland. So this is still a thing that's going on. I wouldn't even have guessed something like that.
Not the first time I've heard something like that.
There's a lady from Galloway saying the same thing happens to her husband, and anytime she gets into it with him, they scratch her.
Oh yeah.
Him or her?
Her.
They scratch her.
She says she tries to shoo him off and push him off and all. And she said a couple times she's making physical contact with him, but she feels sick afterwards, like it's a transfer of energy to her or something, like it overwhelms her or something.
And where is she from?
She is from Galloway, Ireland.
Wow. So Ireland again. Seems to be a real hotbed, pardon the pun.
Well,
People moved to the United States.
That brings up a good point, though, that fairies can be physical. Because that's something a lot of people don't realize, but you can have physical experiences with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, scratching is a thing that can happen.
Now, is it primarily female fairies, or are the male fairies just as bad? Or
no, there's male fairies.
Dinner for it scratching is all I got to say. I want at least some dinner out of this. I'm just saying, I'm not cheap, guys. I want some dinner.
The Lananshi are usually described as female, but there's a whole other sort of category. They're sometimes called Gancanach, love talkers in English. And it's the same kind of thing, but for, it's a male fairy with human women.
Right.
And they also are not good for your longevity. So.
Wow. So is it an energy thing as to why they're
it seems
just
to
taking...
be.
Wow.
Yeah. They cause the person to waste away.
Here's a gentleman, what's his name? Brad from Dublin. He said that
Dublin.
He said that a Catholic preacher gave him a corn priest. Thank you. I couldn't get it out.
Use your words, Joe.
I can't get it out. But anyway, he said the priest gave him some kind of old coin, and it keeps him away from him now. He said he was being followed and harassed by him. And he was even getting to the point where he wasn't sleeping. And he said, I went and talked to my priest, and he gave me this coin. He said, since then, they haven't bothered me.
Yeah, probably blessed.
That's Dublin, Ireland. That's another. What are we, like, locked into Ireland tonight? What's going on? Where's you Scots at, man? Where's you Celts, man? Where's my Welsh brothers at? Come on. I know y'all been approved by fairy, they say. That's where I found out. My last name, I got an Italian last name. I found out I was 83% Welsh and English. I was like, what? Wait, what?
So
I was really confused.
You could
after
technically be fairy bait, just saying.
No, fairies don't like me. I taste funny.
Because you do eat too much weird shit.
That's right.
Just saying.
Too much weird food. Too much alcohol when I was young. That's all.
It sounds a lot to me like, the Christian succubus, incubus sort of thing. thing. These entities just sort of manifest and come out and I guess have their way with, women or men.
Yep.
And literally just drain the life.
Yep,
from
some of
them.
them.
Yeah.
We have accounts. Oh, sorry. I was going to say we have accounts back about 1,000 years into the Anglo-Saxon period in England, where they kind of equate alpha is what they were called, elves, fairies, with succubus and incubus, succubi and incubi, I should say.
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, that's another one of those really old concepts.
Well, apparently it's happening still.
We got a lady named Lilith writing in from London, and she said she is a fairy. She says, I'm 2,200 years old. She said, and the reason why we get things wrong is because we're slightly out of phase with y'all's reality. So sometimes when we pop in and then pop back, it's a different time zone. Well, that's interesting. So why you be trying to bite people and suck on them? Stop that. That's bad. This is a modern era. You're not a damn vampire. Knock it off. No. Wait, what did she bring? Hold on. God damn, girl, you can type like a warrior. Hold on. She said, I'm not kidding. I'm serious. She said, I've cast my spell on many men and women over the years. She said, it's how I've made my fortune. It's how I live. She said, you don't believe me? When I get done, I'll send you a picture of my house in the little mini castle I live in right on the edge of London. And she said, men and women will do anything I say. I said, well, you know what? Come make me do something, because my wife says nobody can make me do any damn thing.
I think maybe she needs to contact Morgan.
Yeah, there you go. Go talk. That's the idea. Yeah. Come visit Morgan.
Have you heard of this sort of thing before, Morgan? Has any self-proclaimed people come to you and say, I am a modern day fairy and this is a thing?
Sure.
And she said she originated from Bangor, North Ireland. That's where she originally was born.
Yeah, there's a whole range of people, different communities, different, all sorts of different things going on. That either consider themselves to be fairies the way this person's describing it, or consider themselves to be a fairy soul in a human body, or
that I can see that. See that.
There's a whole array of things that go on in this sort of genre, I guess we could say. So yeah, I've definitely encountered people before who I don't know exactly how we'd want to phrase this. A
self-proclaimed.
Yeah, who put themselves out there as being fairies, or having strong connections to fairy. So
I'll come down here and introduce you to Lestat if you come down to New Orleans, and y'all can have children. That'd be fairy/vampire. What would that be? What happens
scary.
when a whale?
That'd be scary.
I like that. It's good. Scary.
No doubt. Oh, well.
It also says that Glasgow and Dundee are full of them in Scotland. She said it's one of the places they congregate. Well, I'm not going to visit any of them places. And you see, I'm not even going over there. I've
been to Glasgow. I didn't make it to Dundee, though.
Moscow. How's that? Ain't no damn fairies in Moscow. It's too damn cool.
Oh, Moscow. Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of fairy lore.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
area.
I knew that was coming.
They wouldn't call them fairies. They would call them something else. And my Russian is not anywhere near good enough for me to even try to say them. But
I have a question. With the possibility of intermingling of the species between fairy and human, do you think, or does your guest think, not for me because I have no freaking idea, do you think your guess that there could be any DNA evidence anywhere?
My personal opinion on this would be yes. I don't know that human science would know what to look for. I do folklore. I don't do science. So,
right.
Just to be clear, like I am not up on exactly what DNA tests are looking at.
Because just like if aliens had intervened or anything had messed with us in the past, and today it would just be part of our DNA.
Yeah.
So you'd actually have to catch one of them to sample them to find out if we even had their DNA. Because if anything's halfway true between the aliens, the demons, and the gods, and everything in between, then yes, man's been interbreeding with a lot of things over the years. So our DNA's probably been long contaminated, or well, contaminated
All
is a strong
sorts of
word.
stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, when it comes right down to it, it's just probably who and what we are. It's probably why we ended up being the dominant species on the planet, because we kept inbreeding back and forth until we were the most successful one on the planet. Which, you know, Gaia might get a little pissed and kick us off here soon, so we better watch out. But she said we're not native to this planet. Get the hell off of it. You know, I got something interesting for y'all. You know, the human biological clock is set to a 24 and a quarter hour day, but Earth only has a 23 and three-quarter hour day. Our optimal body temperature for work is 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Earth's optimal temperature is 83 degrees, but Mars was 63 degrees and also had a 24 and a quarter hour day. So why is our body set for another planet? Makes no sense at all. So more and more scientists are starting to think that, ooh, maybe some of the building blocks came from there. They don't exactly know how it got here, but
well, you're the guy with the science degree, so I don't know.
No, I mean, it's just you stumble across these things. We stumble across these things. So the reason I bring it up is because, like, when we're talking about fairies and all these different things, you know, panspermia allows for a lot of DNA to be brought to our planet in a lot of different ways. So over the years, you know, with all the different things going on, no telling what has evolved here. And, you know, we want to list them as magical creatures, and to us, they really are. But in reality, they're probably not magical in the way we think of, the way humans think of magic. It's probably more of just the way they're born, the way the species developed. It's for us, it's special. For them, it's just common. It's like when we talk about paranormal. For all of us, paranormal is normal. For the rest of the morons on the planet, it's paranormal, because they're still living in a fantasy world somewhere, thinking that, you know, oh, well, us little people in this little square and our little sheeples, this is how it is. But we all know, anybody who's done more than 2 years of research and understand there's a lot of stuff out there. If you've been doing it 10 or 15 years, you're like, oh shit, there's things everywhere that can't be explained. Yeah. And it's just too much of it to ignore it. It would be one thing if these were random cases and they would just come up every once in a blue moon. But like fairies, you can take fairies from modern era back, 5,500 years or somewhere around there. Somebody said you can take them back as far as the Sumerians. That's 6 Gs. And then you know, if those cave drawings or them little spark things on the walls, hell, as far as we know, that could be fairies. You know, there's a cave drawing in Germany that's 52,000 years old, and it's a picture of looks to be 3 discs. They're painted white in the air, with about 100 deer running underneath it. And it looks like it looks like one of them actually taking a shot at the deer. Yeah, okay. So you know these guys are only putting on the wall what they see. So what the hell did they see? We know after 200 years ago there was nothing flying up in the sky. At least there wasn't supposed to be anything flying in the sky past 200 years ago.
You don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, as far as our little lonely selves are gone, I mean, you know. As far as I know, Michelangelo and Leonardo and none of them actually got their inventions off the ground. So I'm just thinking.
I don't know. Leonardo has had a lot of missing time.
And of course, there's always Nostradamus and his stuff. But I don't know. And I would never rule out anything. And Jack, what do you mean? Yeah, fairies could be aliens. Aliens could be fairies. Any of this, and using the alien word could be strong because it could be interdimensional or cross-dimensional. Or, you know, when you say ET, you're talking about something otherworldly outside of our planet, but that does not necessarily have to be how this came to be. And fairies could be something that bled through from another dimension and now live here. Until we can actually get our hands on one of them, get them to talk. Well, Lilith, maybe she can tell us. Lilith, do you want to tell us?
I was going to say, yeah, let's ask Lilith.
Lilith, you want to tell us? You want to come on the show with us, Lilith? I'll give you a call in. Hey, if you got Skype, don't even caution nothing. Look, you want to call in, I'll pick up the tab. You can call on my Skype account. Yeah. Yeah, you chicken. I knew you were going to call it. But anyway.
But that was, Morgan was saying
that
also.
She's saying there's at least 60,000 of them around the world today. She said at one time they numbered in the millions, but humans slowly but surely either encroached on their territories or killed them, usually accidentally, not realizing what they were. Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, because humans kill everything, so you should get the hell out of their way, is all I can tell you. You're supposed to be intelligent species. I can understand if you were a dumb bird, but you're supposed to be intelligent. You see humans hacking through the woods with a machete, leave.
So,
or keep them out.
Morgan, have you heard of, there's a thing called the dragon bloodline, right? And it began with elves and fairy folk. And basically, like I said, they tried to stay within their own bloodlines, and eventually they had to go outside of the bloodlines. And this is apparently where the Merovingian line came from, a royal line, which isn't the royals that we have today because that's split. But apparently they lived very in very peacefully amongst the living up until the church got involved, and the church sort of taught people to fear them, and therefore they started rebelling against them. Have you found any of that in your research?
I mean, I've heard of it by the author who wrote the book that's basically about that,
Yes.
that you just said.
Yes.
Looking at across like the actual folklore, we don't see quite the same thing.
Right.
It's sort of a different point of view, but
yes.
You know,
Again,
as your
perception.
Right, and as your lovely co-host was just saying, there's really more that we don't know than that we do know, and there's so many different opinions out there. I have a friend who's a very adamant believer in the whole dragon bloodline concept.
Yes.
You know, my main personal focus is pretty much Ireland, and then I mean I'm aware of things that are related to that, but
yes.
Particularly in Irish mythology and folklore, we really don't see anything specifically along those lines.
Right.
We do see the idea of certain sort of more well-known fairy beings interbreeding, for lack of a more elegant term, with kings or ruling classes or, you know, what have you. So, I mean, that aspect of it, you know, there could be. Yeah, there is folklore for that. But the more complex things that book gets into,
it's
was sort of
complex.
Like yeah,
and all that sort of complex
pre-Christian elven history kind of that he digs into. That's not something that we tend to find more widely in folklore.
No, I think that's a whole other tale, so to speak. You know, it really is. It's like anything. You can't really say 100% that it is or that it isn't. You know, it goes so far back. You know, I mean, I wish the author was still among the living because I'd be all over it. It's just something, you know, there are other people I think who have picked up a little bit from where he left off. So there must be something to it. You know, it seems to make a lot of sense, you know, because they were pretty noble class of their own, you know. I mean, let's face it, there's things that they can do when you're a magical being of that sort, whether you're, again, interdimensional, whether you're just, you know, using, you know, all these portals or just in hiding amongst different places on the planet. That makes you pretty darn exceptional that you've been able to evade, you know, extinction, so to speak, because they're pretty old beings, as I'm sure Lilith will tell you. But you know, I don't know. I think it's great that you're studying. I'm looking forward to seeing what else you have coming up. I know we have you booked again, you know, coming on I guess 2021 now. Yes. Yeah. God,
yeah, it's almost here, 2021.
It's true. Yeah,
we're so close.
Yeah, I know.
Thank God we're close.
Go away, COVID. Go away. Yeah.
God, man.
Joe, do you have any other questions?
Well, Lilith's got she said, if you're really interested in fairies, she said there's several times a year in several places in England that you can still see large groups of fairies dancing. She said it'll be mostly female fairies because the males aren't considered fairies, they're considered something else. And look, girl, I have no idea what that word is. You better break it down like 5 syllables or some damn thing's like 2 miles long. No, it looks like brick. Look, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it because it doesn't, the way you written it doesn't make any sense.
Now I'm really curious.
She said also too, in real crop circles, fairies get caught in them for a while. It confuses them and they dance. She said herself, she went to go visit a winter crop circle with a friend of hers outside of Stonehenge. And her friend was laughing because it took her 50 minutes to figure out how to get out of the circle.
Is that why they do fairy circles?
She says, she's writing away. She says there's something about it She said because there's no sharp angles on it, fairies move through the world in a different phase in reality than humans do. She said that's why some things that doesn't seem confusing to humans is confusing to us because our dimension is different than yours is.
Is this why they do fairy circles?
I guess, because that's what she was saying about the dances. They dance in circles. So now I'm really confused. Yeah, you better come. You got to come. You got to call the guest and talk to the guest. Look, she's got lots of books. I'm sure she's easy to contact.
Yes,
drop her a
contact
line.
Morgan.
You might be a book by yourself, Miss Fairy Girl.
I mean, fairy circles and folklore are supposed to be places that fairies have danced. Generally not particularly safe for humans, but
and humans leave offerings, I've noticed.
She said she thought the crop circles were originally designed to catch fairies.
I've never heard that.
I've never heard that either. I've heard a lot about crop circles, from chaos theory to a whole host of other theories. And I do know that crop circles, for more than, if you go 30 years back, all the way back in England, they go back about 2,000 years, 3,000 years, but they're only circles. They didn't get fancy until like the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything got fancy in the 80s.
Yeah. The hair got extremely fancy in the 80s, man. That shit was going wild. We had hair going everywhere, man. Anyway.
Yeah.
No, a little serious. I mean, you can contact the show. There's lots of shows in the network. No, I've had fairy people. I can't remember her name. That's an older lady. She used to take pictures of these fairies. She had great pictures of these things in her yard, and they looked like little mini people. I'm not kidding you. They looked like they were 3 inches tall, and they were very defined. But we never got any way to, we had several analysts that work with us that do film, but she never sent us any of the original. So, you can only take it for what it is. I mean, the photos were great, and for a long time they were on the website, but I honestly, I couldn't tell you if they were real, fake. I don't instantly assume that people are faking things. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to be honest. I'm a researcher by trade, so I'm going to check it out. No matter what, I'm going to check it when anybody tells me. It's just part of who and what I am. Do I want to meet a fairy? Lilith, are you hitting on me?
Yeah, I try not to question people's beliefs. You believe what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
I say that all the time. I say, whatever makes you feel as snug as a bug in the rug, that's if it makes you feel that way, you should believe it.
Yep. If it's tangible evidence that can be analyzed, that's a different story.
Well, look, Lilith, if you can put magical spells on me, and you need to come to the United States and either put magic on Trump or Biden. I'll pay for your trip over here if you can put some magic on either one of them two idiots. They're equal idiots to me. We're not getting it. It's not a political show, but really, I'm serious. Come on over and throw some dust on them and, I don't know, straighten their asses out. Jesus. Maybe sprinkle some dust on Congress or something. I'm just looking for a quick fix here,
I don't think there's enough dust for that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's near enough for that. We'd have to dig up the whole Middle East or something. I know what. So Jack Harkness. Yeah, you're a Doctor Who fan. Jack Harkness is writing in from London, and he's saying on a couple occasions when they were out crop circle hunting, they had run across things in the crop circles that actually, when they tried to catch them, would turn and take on like a fierce, scared, like vicious look, like they would puff. I don't know what you mean by puff. I guess you mean like their body would puff out or something. And just long enough to scare it out of us, and we'd turn off and run, and then they would run the other way. He said it was more like it was a reaction than it was intentional, meaning like we scared them, and it was just a fear reaction because they kept going the other way, and we went the other way. It was like two hitting head on and taking off. He said, I ain't never been that scared my whole life. He said, because coming up behind them, they looked very beautiful women. That's why we were trying to catch up and talk to them, because we're guys. And of course, your dogs would be more like it, but still. And then they turned around, scared the shit out of you. I just think that's great, actually.
That reminds me of that scene from that Ghostbusters movie, the original Ghostbusters movie with the librarian.
That's right. That's right.
For everyone who's familiar with the movie.
Absolutely.
All the Ghostbusters had something good in it. And even though the last one wasn't as great, Chris Hemsworth was funny as hell in that movie. He stole the movie. It's a shame because the man was a doof, man.
Yeah, make the big hunky guy the nerdy guy. That's the way to go.
He played it good. I give him credit. It was funny. And it could have been better. They should have just did him as daughters or sisters or some shit and let him just do another movie. But I like Ghostbusters people. I'm a Halloween freak. I play all that stuff at Halloween.
yeah.
No
Yeah,
pixies
same.
allowed. No
Yeah.
pixies allowed. This is a no pixie station, man. I'm telling y'all, we ain't have no pixie host.
Yeah, I'm sensing some like pixie hatred from you here. Like,
Yeah. Okay.
threats to
So
eat
I don't want no
them.
damn demon women
let's
around me.
separate that a little bit.
Actually, because Lila
What's the
says
difference
all
between a
pixies are
pixie
female.
and an elf? Or
She's saying that their ears, face, and eyes are much more defined, more of an elfish look than a human look, and they tend to be much more angry than a regular fairy.
Morgan?
Maybe because their
I'm
faces
sensing some
distorted.
pixie hatred here too.
I know, Lilith. Are you hating on? Did you like
Yeah.
pixie envy or something?
Yeah, I'm just
I'm
trying to figure it out.
feeling bad for
I'm
the
a little
pixies.
confused here.
Me hating on the pixies.
Yeah,
I thought pixies were just tiny fairies. Told you what I know.
I mean, if you look at the older folklore, most of the things today that we picture as tiny are
Mhm.
not. I mean,
Right.
there are some tiny fairies in literature and folklore, but pixies come from Welsh and Cornish
Mhm.
folklore, and they're usually described again as looking fairly
Mhm.
human-sized. I think they often have red hair. Trying to remember this because it's not my main area of focus here, but
Mhm.
it's basically just sort of that local term, particularly in Cornwall, for what we would call fairies or elves in other
Mhm.
places.
Right.
So particular types of folklore, like changeling folklore, the idea that fairies steal human babies and
Yeah.
leave behind like fake substitutes. We would see that with pixies in those
Right.
areas. Or the whole stolen bride thing, or they borrow
Pixies
midwives.
again.
Yeah. In those
Yeah.
areas, it would be pixies
Wow.
doing it more
So
so.
they're just like assholes, basically, with wings.
Probably, I hesitate to say this, like, and watch my whole computer blows up or
Right.
something, but
I know.
you could probably say that about the majority of fairies across folklore.
Wow. That really just, ruins my image of, like, I know that they have some that could be really aggressive, but
Yeah.
on an average, you just like to think that they're kind of sweet.
Well,
It-
they're mostly immortal sort of beings with a lot of time on their hands.
Right.
That,
So,
playing pranks is a good way to pass the time and entertain
As you were saying
yourself.
earlier, they get bored.
Yeah,
bored. Yeah. So,
that
immortal
is
too.
accurate.
So
A,
they
a
could
lot of
just,
a lot of fairy folklore is based on the idea that fairies were bored.
right.
Well,
And
I
That's
understand.
it.
I mean, if you got
So,
one of them lifespans that are endless, it's easy to get bored.
yeah,
So if they
Okay, that
have
looks
a
like an
bone to pick
alien.
with you, they're just going to follow you around for the rest of your mortal life, basically.
Oh,
So
yeah.
some
Yeah, and
woman just
there's
sent us a video of something she filmed in her backyard. It's tiny. It's like 4 inches tall. It looks more like a damn alien than it looks like a fairy to me. I'm not even sure what that is. It got dark eyes, 4 of them, I think. What the hell is that? Look, sweetie, I'm sure that's not a fairy. You send that to the fairy expert because I'm not even sure what that is. That looks like something. And see, it looks like a big wasp nest.
Well,
In there feeding on
do you
wasps.
have a website, Morgan, that people can send you mail and photos or videos?
your best bet, honestly, as much as I hate to say this, is I have a Facebook page.
Okay.
But I am responsive when people message me there.
Okay.
A
I
lot of people
hate.
use their Facebook pages
I
nowadays.
know sadly it's like the center of the universe, but I'm on Twitter too. I don't check my Twitter messages as much as
Yes, I can't tweet no more. Everybody over there's Twitter tweets. So I mean, or Twitter idiots. But I can't do it no more. But
there's
160 characters is a waste of time.
there's a good folklore community on Twitter, and there's something called Folklore Thursday where people share little snippets of folklore. So
Right.
it's like a moth to a flame. I can't resist.
No, I'll have to go follow you just so I could follow all these little
My
community things.
shenanigans. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a very strong interest in older Irish, the language, and modern Irish language. So if you follow me on social media, you'll be subjected to a lot of random
like Gaelic
language nonsense.
Yeah.
Irish,
Yeah, that's tongue twisting stuff right there. So
See, all these photos are tiny things, man. Come on, people, send me some good photos, man.
oh my gosh.
Jimmy, I
Well-
want them photos of you talking about the topless one walking around in the backyard. Send me that one with wings, huh?
I'm just gonna like leave that right there.
I'm just
And
saying, I'm just reading the comments. Don't give me try hell about it. I mean,
I don't know.
actually, somebody just sent like 100 pictures to my thing,
That's
and all
dedication.
of that's just they're all
That's
like tiny guys. I wish I was on the other computer. I would just put them up where y'all could see them. That looks like the Statue of Liberty in miniature. Yeah, you sure that's a ferry, people? Look, come on now. Some of this shit I'm not sure about here.
no,
I
but
just
maybe you just need to
respect.
go find Morgan on Facebook and start sending them in there. And and if you have a good story to tell, message her. And because this is what she does, she researches all of these things, and
Might be a
that's what
ferry.
keeps
She
the
got red
research
hair.
going. It's just keeping the stories out there. Like we heard a few tonight. I was just like gobsmacked. Like what?
Me too.
This is seriously happening right now as we speak. What?
Yep.
So, and these are dedicated people because it's like 4 o'clock in the morning over there.
It is.
Yeah, I was thinking that when he was talking about some of the people calling in from
Yes,
Ireland
But
and London. I'm like,
we've got
that's
a huge audience, and we
we have
always
a
have that.
huge overseas
When my
audience.
show
Oh,
airs on Wednesdays, man, a good third of my audience is calling from the island. They're wide
that's
awake too. I'm
true.
like,
I'm
"What
Oh,
impressed.
the-"
There's a lot of stuff out there that I love, but I don't know if there's anything I love enough to get up at like 3 or 4 in the
I
morning.
know.
I
Yeah,
know
it's
I'll
funny too,
watch
because
this
like
on replay.
our
it's
Italian audience,
crazy.
when they're listening to me, they're listening at 4 in the morning. See, it's different for our Asian Australian audience because it's the next day, usually, midday or
Hmm.
something. So it's a little
Yep.
different there. But for the Europeans, it's mid morning.
Oh
They're
yeah, it's
like,
anywhere from
oh,
4 to 6 in the morning right there for some
I
of
love
our
when I'm
listeners.
doing guest over there like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They want to go to sleep.
Uh,
Oh,
Well, with that being said, I am thrilled that you're going to be joining us again because by then I'll have a whole other bunch of questions. Because
Yeah,
I've had
this was
more.
really fun.
and then the ferry girl will be back on the show that day, so she ain't
Well,
listening nice. I can get away with that. So
hopefully, no, but this would be a good opportunity. Here I'm going to tell everybody right now when Morgan is coming back on, and you can contact her or contact me on the Outer Realm, and let me see. When do we have you back on? So if you guys have questions or stories that you want to share with Morgan, I think that would be like really awesome because I'd love to hear them. And she's back on May the 12th because we book really far in advance, which is why like I booked you right when we booked you for this one because I knew by then it would be gone. So May the 12th. And if you guys want to include some stories, personal experiences, photographs, video, send it over, to either the Outer Realm Facebook page or the Outer Realm contact at gmail.com or send them to Joe. He can put them on while the show is going on and we can actually relay your stories or questions to Morgan.
here's a
Yeah, I
woman
love all
from.
that stuff.
I think her name is Asla. She's calling from Tehran. She said,
Oh,
"Believe it or not, there are ferries in the Middle East." She said,
yes.
I don't want to get caught talking to you, so I'm gonna make this quick." She says, "There's a very large group of ferries throughout the Middle East." She says, "Common law, they got a different name for them." She said, "But I am female, and it is the next day here, and I don't want anybody to catch us on the computer. But great show, I love you guys. Thank you, keep it up.
Oh,
Goodbye."
thank you.
Fast and
Yeah.
sweet, man.
I
He's
like that.
I still
It's like,
love him out there
start
these days.
over.
We
No, that's,
appreciate you listening now.
yeah,
Yep, there's
thank
there's a
you.
lot of folklore in the Middle East about jinn.
Yes.
And there's a big discussion about whether those would be considered fairies or similar to fairies.
I was going to
It's
ask you
really
about that.
fascinating.
Yeah, they're really on the fence with that. Some people are totally the other way, and then you have a lot of people who think they're very much one of the same.
There's a lot of similarities. They're also warded off by iron. They also like milk for an offering.
Mm-hmm.
They have very similar ways of relating to humans and ways they can help or harm humans. Like it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting if you have like two columns of like describe fairies, describe jinn. There's a lot of
If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a freaking duck, right? Like it's just there are some of the stuff you talked about tonight, like they're so similar. You really do have to ask yourself. There's so much I think that religion has pulled it away. I think religion has taken a lot of ancient folklore, pagan folklore, and made it its own. And that makes it very confusing for the actual records, the actual accounts.
Humans are very confusing.
Aren't we?
Everything humans do is confusing.
Joe confuses me all the freaking time.
Maury's writing in from Iceland, no, Greenland. I'm sorry.
Oh,
hey, it
Greenland.
looks like Iceland to me.
Cool.
Very nice.
So he said, if you want to catch a fairy, put out carrot cake with vanilla icing on it.
That would catch me.
I was going to say, I'd pretty much be there for some of that too.
What do you mean? How do you know he said you can use whole carrots, but they prefer the sweetness of the icing. He said, but they can't turn down carrots. It's like one of their favorite. I said, how do you know that? Have you been out there asking them what your favorite food is?
Have you captured one? Have you videoed any? Have you seen them?
Oh, okay. I see. He said when he was 16, how old are you today? He said when he was 16, his mother had put a whole cake on the window, letting it cool, and it hadn't even been iced yet. And he said, I was sitting there in the chair waiting for it. I was sticking my finger in the ice and eating the ice. And when it looked like 8 or 9 of these 4-foot tall women came up and just started grabbing hunks of the cake by hand and eating it.
That's insane.
He said it was still warm, and then they left. So, of course, his mom came back and blamed him. So he's like, no, Mom, look how little the handprints are compared to mine.
I would 100% be there for free carrot cake. Not going to lie.
So he said he kept telling her.
So maybe you're partially a fairy.
So his mom said, I don't believe you, but I'm going to bake another one. I'm going to put a slice in the window and see what happens. And sure enough, they came back and took the slice. And I said it caused a fight because there was one slice between 4 of them.
Oh, wow. See,
I want to see four fairy women on four numbers of carrot cake. I'll sell tickets and make $1 million.
That's crazy. I love hearing these stories. See, Joe has access to a Facebook chat room that I do not have access to.
Well,
that should be rectified.
I've been doing radio for 20 years. I get like these questions are actually going to my iCard email. But
right. Okay, but I think that's great. You're getting good stories, and it's a lot of really good feedback, and clearly the audience is like all over the place listening to this tonight.
And Elvin and Lilith say not all fairies are sexy goddesses like them. Oh wait, you're a fairy too. Oh, come on now, y'all just screw them with me tonight. I just tell this like fairy heaven up in here tonight.
Lilith, this is the sort of topic that's going to attract people who...
Look, Lilith, if you really fly, you put your little wings on and fly your butt over here. Or is it the Atlantic Ocean too far? You can land on a ship somewhere, hops of ships if it's too far of a ride. I want to meet a fairy. No, I want to meet a nice fairy. I don't mean no nasty fairy. I want to meet a nice fairy. Yeah, it sounds interesting to me. I'm all right. Look, I'm trying to communicate all the time.
I feel like we've segued into like fairy Tinder.
I know. I'm just sitting here scratching my head going, how the freaking hell did we end up here?
I'm just trying to meet some people, that's all.
Oh, yeah.
Or some super beings
social
or something.
Butterfly, for sure.
Lilith, so what kind of powers, so we got well, I know we're past, but we go a few more minutes. So for all of us, what kind of powers do fairies actually have? Because Lilith says she got the powers to make men love her, to put people to sleep, to change. She said strong enough she can even change a date. Like if it's less than 12 hours, she can switch it back and forth in that 12-hour period. So, well, I have no idea why you didn't want to do that. But she said anything if they eat particular foods, which she's not mentioning what it is. She says that it makes both men and women very attractive to them. That sounds like Michael in the brownie thing. I mean, in the chocolate chip cookie thing. Well, in the movie, Michael, he smelled like chocolate chip cookies. All the women who were attracted to him. So you give off some pheromone is what it is. I'm just trying to figure out what it is. Now, I've heard many, many times over the years that men and women are attracted to fairies and elves and stuff. I just was wondering if there's like some kind of pheromone or something that y'all are giving off. You don't know? Okay, I was just asking. Well, you need to talk to the fairy expert, okay? Not the alien expert.
Okay, yes. And on that note, we are.
And Jack said Amelia just keeps her wings hidden. That could be her angel wings as far as you know, buddy. Okay, it could be her alien wings, too. I call it Bubbles the Gray. So I'm just saying.
You need to be nice to Amelia. She's grieving right now.
Write to the guest tonight. I'm being serious now. Y'all need to write to the guest tonight and tell her about your accounts. I'm sure she'd love to hear about it.
I always love firsthand
And
account.
I'm sure she'll be able to tell which one of y'all are telling the truth and which one of y'all are just BSing me. So, no, I see a lot of fun stuff written here. We're just out of time, but y'all should have got this going on earlier tonight. Yeah, y'all should have just got to writing more. Yeah, she's a very
I'll be
lovely
back
lady.
when we come back for the second time. We can...
You will be back.
Look,
I think you should
very
just.
lovely ladies. Right, I'm sorry, I should have said both of y'all. Somebody had mentioned your guest was a very lovely lady, and they said, "Well, that was rude, Joe." I was like, "Man, y'all are on tonight, aren't you?"
Okay, with that being said, yes, please send all your stories in, all your comments, suggestions, anything. Morgan will be back on, and it'd be great to hear them. It really would. So,
Yeah.
Morgan, tell everybody before we go how they can find you.
Well, my full name is Morgan Daimler, Daimler is how you spell it. It's German, so nobody spells it like it's pronounced. But I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. Everything's under my name. I'm very boring and straightforward that way. And
your 12 books can be found. I posted a link that just had them all on the group page. So where can they find all of those?
Amazon.com has them, Barnes & Noble, and then most brick and mortar stores, for those of you that are, in places where you can shop in brick and mortar, because I know not everyone is with COVID, but if you ask, they can order them. Oh,
fantastic. Fantastic. So nice and easy, right at your fingertips, and no reason to not delve into that before the next time, because May, you got 5 months. Middle May. So yeah, you got 5 months to really get into it, and they probably make a great Christmas gift, I would say. So thank you for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, it was a real pleasure. I was really looking forward to it, and of course, Joe just enlightened the whole last little bit. It was questions and comments.
Listening to y'all.
Oh, I'm listening.
Just watching your sparkly background.
I know, it's very psychedelic. It's almost like brainwashing. Actually,
it's Christmas. We gotta get Christmassy now.
I can't be Christmas and we're Halloweeners. I still can't get over that. But anyway, so I do have to sign us off. And again, thank you for joining us. And I can't wait till the next one. And again, we'll have a slew of questions. And I can't wait to see what you're going to have for us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Morgan.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.